Hi all, I have an absolutely amazing game to show you. This is AlphaZero against Stockfish, one of the 10 key games in the recent research article, which has sparked huge interest in the world of AI, artificial intelligence, and chess. AlphaZero playing white played knight f3 in this game, knight f6, and we see actually the queen's Indian defense being used. So white is sidestepping normal Nimzo Indian lines with knight c3 by avoiding that pin. We have queen's Indian territory here, and a repeat of this gambit of a pawn now with d5. So already there's a dynamic tone set to this game. Knight h4 going to that key and very aggressive f5 square. c6, c takes, knight takes. The knight goes in there, it's attacked there. Knight c7, e4. So does black have compensation for the pawn? I always thought that black did actually. If you look at Kasparov games, Kasparov has done well with this pawn sack in many games. d5 was played, e takes, knight takes, and now knight c3. Not worried about knight takes. And in fact, this is played. White can in fact play b takes without any issue. If queen takes, that would be a huge mistake. Knight takes, e7 check, winning a piece there. And say bishop c8, this is actually good compensation for the pawn, this position. But the more interesting move, queen g4, is played. Thing mate. Now we see the move g6, which does weaken some squares. Knight h6 check, king g7, and now this pawn is taken. Bishop c8, queen f4, queen d6. Black is really keen for an exchange of queens. The queen evades this with queen a4 going on this side of the board. It seems a bit odd, and there's a very tactical move which most humans would probably say, oh no, what have I done? When seeing this, can you see what black plays now if I give you 5 seconds? And usually if we were playing against computer, it would be time to resign after seeing this next move. Okay, g5. Yes, this knight is stranded. It's pretty stranded, rather. It has got one square technically. It's nearly stranded. Okay, you might think you have to use that square, but you might be thinking, well, f5 after, and you'd be right. If you know, knight g4, f5. This seems to be a back foot. This wasn't actually played, this retreat, believe it or not. Something else was played. Say we get this position. Black's doing very well here. In fact, after this g5, white was really casual about this. Can you guess what white played? It's not knight g4, that's the clue. Okay, white played just rook e1. Just offering that knight. Now, it's restricting the ways that black can take that knight. If queen takes, we can just take on e7 for sure. The king ventures out here to gobble that knight. What's the punishment? h4. Now the threat is immediately rook takes, queen takes, and bishop g5. Check. So black parries that. Just to put that on the board. You can see that this is the threat. So black plays f6. And a piece down, you might think, well, what's the quick thing we need to make sure we can justify our piece sacrifice? Surely we need to justify it quickly. Guess what white plays here, if I give you 5 seconds, starting from now. Okay. Bishop e3. Connecting rooks. Hello, hello. And there's a rook ready to go to d1 to harass the queen. Look at black's queen side. Now maybe one can guess that white thought there was sufficient compensation here with the king slightly exposed and out and about, and the queen side slightly tangled here. And there's pressure on c6 as well, so if this knight does move, isn't the c6 pawn an issue? Black here played bishop f5. Let's have a look at a few more examples just to get a feel for the issues. If knight d7, perhaps best is actually rook a d1 first, then queen takes c6, hitting the rook, and you start to feel the pain of the black position. But here, even here, though, there's interesting resources, not just the obvious. There's actually rook d5, and we've got that nasty pin there on the f6 pawn. So say bishop b7, we can just play this, and that's horrible. What does black do here? I'll give you an example of a nasty line. a5, this is a token move. Rook takes g5, and the black king's going to get it. Discovered check, and bishop f3, checkmate. Yeah, if black wanted to lose quickly with a5. So I'm just giving you a feel, I hope, of some of the issues here in this position. It's very, very interesting. So that knight d7, yeah, is the way it can be punished here with the king on h6 is intriguing. So bishop f5, keeping c6 secure, but the knight is not getting out for a moment. Rook a d1, queen a3. Black really wants the exchange of queens. White does not. Keeps the tension on rather cruelly here with that king out and about. Black's got some headaches here. b5, or in computer terms, its CPUs must be getting a bit heated. Okay, so b5 hitting the queen. Just to show you some more issues here. If knight a6, you might think, well, a6? In fact, in this position, there would be a very powerful move. I wonder if you can guess it. It seems bishop e4 introduces a whole wealth of pain into the position with the king on h6, including king g2 and rook h1 and hg. You can see that that g2 square is useful for rook h1, and that's useful in its own right for weakening light squares to take off that bishop. And say the queen became centralized, it's on the bishop here, but it's protected at the moment with the queen. But let's show an example. Bishop d4 here takes, and this is just getting horrible. In fact, we don't even need to put a rook on h1 here. You can see the devastation of black's position. That's just a horrible line to show. Yeah, so this is really getting tricky after bishop e4. It just seems black's got to be very careful here. Indeed. We see bishop takes e4, queen takes. Sorry, this is in the knight a6 line. Let's go back. So black here played b5. It's in the queen. hg, fg, and now queen h4 check, exploiting that pin. King g6, and here is one of the most remarkable moves I've ever seen a piece down. I don't think I've ever seen even a tell game this outrageous calmness here, total calmness. With an eye on central squares is my clue to you for the next move. So if you can think of the most ridiculous move to justify being a piece down for a strong attack, maybe you'll stumble on it. It does influence the center, and does kind of potentially punish a knight move as well. That's another clue. So what move do you think would be significant here? Okay, queen h1. And I remember reading Demis was saying it shows chess from different, like as though from a different dimension. This is not a feature really of that much of human chess, where we haven't seen many examples of this kind of play, a piece down and playing a move like queen h1, which is kind of using the diagonal and the central squares to maybe get back, springboard back a relentless attack again. It's an incredible concept, and the queen side having issues. Now black played king g7 here, so we really are witnessing chess in another way in this game. This is remarkable. I want to give you some flavors here of punishment. If knight d7, as I say, the center can be used as a springboard to get the attack back here with g4, it seems, because after bishop takes, bishop e4 check, this is horrible because the queen's also influencing h7 from h1. And so, for example, bishop f5, rook takes d7 is massive for white. And, you know, black's kind of busted there, actually, already. Yeah, so that's knight d7. And if knight a6, g4, bishop takes, check. Now here, bishop takes. And you can see the queen hitting c6 now. So it's not just the central squares, it's that c6 issue. There's always punishment provided. Well, when I say always, in some positions there's punishment for that knight coming out. But here the rook's dropping off. So yeah, this queen h1, not only nifty looking, hyper modern, but really not only establishes the centre as a springboard for continuing the attack, but also the issues around the queen side as well. The whole concept is remarkable. To play this so calmly from a piece down, to actually pursue this. I'll give you another example. a5, bishop d4 check. Or not, sorry. Let's go on. King g7 here. No, I think a5 for later. There's another variation I want to show you soon. Bishop e4 is played. Now it's here that I want to show you two moves. Black played bishop g6. Now let's see what is going on here. Say black just played a move like a5. Let's see what the issues are. Bishop d4 check. And here queen h6. You see that queen's ready to spring back into action. And this is just devastating. This combination of the two bishops and the queen are just overwhelming here. Black's without defense. Look at that queen. It's just irrelevant to king safety as well in all this. This is just total murder. So yeah, black has to be very careful. Now you might think, well, instead of bishop g6, what about taking? This is where the queen can spring back. And queen f5 here, believe it or not, is very strong. For example, dismantling the king side and then just getting through with the rooks will be checkmating. So this is just fascinating. Bishop g6 is played. And now we... okay, so bishop g6, we have bishop takes g6. And the queen's very, very agile. Queen h3, striking at some light squares. Now in this position, rook h8 just fells totally to bishop d4 check, because after bishop f6, bishop takes, and then queen takes h8. With the rooks not being connected, there's all sorts of issues like that. The black rook's not being connected. So after queen h3, we have bishop f6 was played. King g2 now. Yeah, rook h1 is on the cards. Very dangerous position indeed. Queen takes a2. I'll give you some samples of other things. Bishop takes c3. There's actually bishop takes g5 here. This would be crushing. For example, rook h8, queen e6, and say black takes that rook. Check, check, and mate. It just shows the dangers of the king safety and the disconnected rooks and the queen over here. So basically, this is very, very dangerous now. So black took this pawn on a2. So black's been made to look like a computer from the 1980s, just taking pawns on the queen side. It seems neglecting the king over here. And now rook h1, threatening queen h7 checkmate. But now this queen comes back to defend. Now here is another very remarkable and seemingly deep move in multiple ways actually. I wonder if you can guess it. Or it might come to your consideration because there's a pawn attacked here. So what would you do? Okay, the pawn wasn't simply protected with bishop d4. I think this would be almost okay for black, it seems. Well, if we can trust this analysis here, white might be okay just about. But white played something different here. c4, which has interesting implications indeed. Very, very interesting. Like opening up potentially this diagonal if a queen could come later to c3 in some lines, or opening up this diagonal if the rook can be exposed in some lines, because that knight's still not in the game. The rooks are still disconnected here. Now, black played rook e8. Let's say b4, just to give some flavours here. Rook d6, check. This is nasty. After rook takes f6 check, queen takes g5, queen d5 check, and queen takes a8. Ouch. Yeah, it's just fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. So b4 doesn't seem that great after rook d6. So we see rook e8 in this position. Bishop d4, just casually just taking away potentially another key defensive piece here. Bishop takes, rook takes. And again, this knight dare not move because of the infiltration rook d7. So you can see that in these spectator pieces, which is a term I've enthusiastically used on other classic engine clashes in the past. Yeah, the spectator pieces on the queen side are not helping here. Rook d8 was played. Now, here is fascinating as well. This idea of the c3 square and the diagonal unfolds another story in this variation. If b takes, can you see what white could do here? Okay, whilst the rook is holding against knight d7, g4 is good for queen c3 to be threatened. Yeah, this angle, it's just remarkable how this queen's so agile in these lines. And say this queen went to e6, check, we can actually get the rook out like this for an attack. And it's just too much. The king's too exposed and white will be winning material. So very, very dangerous position indeed. It's just staggering. So anyway, black played rook d8. We have rook takes d8, queen takes, not minding just being a piece down here, because now queen e6, and there are big ideas in this position like queen e5 check and the rook crashing through. Now knight d7 was played, holding that e5 square. If it's not held against queen e5, let me just show you the pain. Queen e5 check. Here, can you see what white can do here? Okay, just rook h7 check would win the queen, and this would be enough. This is good enough to win this position. Black's not going to be resisting too long with the rook and knight as an example line. White would have a big advantage there. So queen e6, yeah, knight d7, yeah, on queen f6, yeah, you guess. I hope you can guess. Okay, rook h7 would win that queen there. So there's limited ways of defending this position. So knight d7. Now we have rook d1 pinning that knight. Knight c5. And this basically loses the exchange. It's going to an ending, the exchange down. You might think, well, black's got 3-to-1 pawns over here. Maybe that ending's okay. Now, before we enter that, there's not really much else black could do here with that enormous pin, actually. Basically, if knight f8, this is again just the exchange down this line. It's, yeah, it's a big advantage for white. So black loses the exchange with knight c5. So rook takes here. And we see this ending where there isn't much potential for the pawns here. It's a bit of technique, to be honest, now. Yeah, it's just the exchange up. Technique, really. The damage has been done earlier on. And here, black resigned. So yes, this game does show that we seem to have missed in our human chess experience some ways of playing an attack against the king, which it does seem like a combination of Mikhail Tal and Karpov, because there's constraints of the queenside pieces whilst conducting this attack on the king side. And the most agile piece on the board which is the queen, shows enormous agility in this game with queen h1, later queen h3, later the c4 for queen c3 to go on this angle. There was this angle, there was this angle, diagonal. Queen has, in the variations, intense agility, and yeah, some of the Tails games have that as well. Celebrating our biggest attacking piece in football terms, like the forward of the football, English football, European football, the queen just going in many places potentially in this game. It's just remarkable to play this whole thing a piece down though, and regain with interest the sacrificed piece. So a stunning game, and I consider this one of the more outrageously interesting attacking games by AlphaZero. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Comments, questions, likes, shares appreciated. Thanks very much.